Today I have Grammy-winning songwriter and producer Dom Randazzo, also known as Dom Did It, right? His credits cover a spectrum of acts from Jason Derulo to Chris Brown to Tiësto to My Chemical Romance. It's really eclectic, so I'm kind of interested to hear how you have your kind of fingerprint on all those different acts. And I'm really looking forward to this chat because I feel like you're somebody who really has their pulse on both the creative side and the tech side of the industry because of your involvement with Chartmetric. So let's just jump into it. And my first question I have for you, because of your journey so far, based on that journey and that experience, what are some ways you would recommend creatives kind of getting their foot in the door?
Yeah, great question, and thanks for having me, of course. It's really exciting to be doing this. What I would say is, especially when you're early on in your career, your biggest asset is time, right? You have the time to be able to do things. So when I was, running around New York, interning at studios, trying to get my way into every single session I could, in some cases I would be just the guitar player. In other cases, I would be the engineer. And then in other cases, I would be the songwriter and the producer as well. So I think the era of the specialist is kind of over. And you kind of have to learn to generalize and be able to do a ton of different things because then people see you as an asset and not a liability. So I would say, especially if you're early on in your career, your biggest advantage is time. So just try to do everything, learn everything, and then you be a part of someone's Rolodex and they call you into interesting projects and you end up developing a career kind of naturally over time. So.
For sure. I mean, I think about myself and where I'm at in my life now compared to 15 years ago. And time was my biggest asset for sure.
Right.
And that allowed me to say yes to pretty much any opportunity so I can really go after it. And then it's kind of like put your best foot forward, do your best work. It's a meritocracy at the end of the day. So your next job is based on the job you just did. Did you do a good job enough for them to call you back or to tell somebody else to call you? It's kind of the way I see it too. So what are some of your principles, like going into a writing session or going into the studio with an artist? Like, for example, you just won that Grammy Award for your work with Chris Brown on 11/11. Do you attribute that to kind of luck, right place, right time, or was it preparation, or was it that saying of like luck is the intersection of preparation and timing, or whatever the saying is?
Yeah.
How do you view it, and like what are some of your principles?
I mean, it's a great question. I think that if we're being hyper honest, luck always has a little bit to do with it, but you can use the laws of probability to your advantage to put yourself in situations where you're more likely to be lucky than if not. So it kind of goes back to my original answer where if you constantly put yourself in rooms with highly motivated creative people, the ripple effect of that is that you'll end up being involved in a lot of really cool projects. It's kind of like the 80-20 rule. You get, out of the 80% of the work you do, 20% will get you the results you want. So I kind of tend to follow that principle. And, when it comes to sessions I work on either with artists directly or with artists, engineers or writers, people a part of their camps, one thing I've learned over the years is you reach a certain point and everybody kind of has a certain amount of talent and a certain amount of competency when it comes to writing or producing records. The difference between you developing that relationship and being able to bring a song to market and someone who just has a bunch of songs in their hard drive is your ability to develop a genuine relationship with the artist in their camp. So I always say it doesn't matter how good the song is at the end of the day. It really just matters how the artist feels when they leave the room, right?
Mm.
Because that will develop trust, and you can't see projects to fruition unless you develop trust with an artist. So in the case of Chris Brown or Jason Derulo or even Tiësto, I got respect from him and from his camp by virtue of being a part of this crew that is known to kind of be reliable and, deliver things on time and understand the artist's energy and things of that nature. So it's really a combination of being fast, being proficient, but also being a good relationship manager, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Do you, looking back now that you have some perspective on everything that's happened prior, is there some sort of like through line that's connecting all of these different situations together? Because the acts we're rattling off, from My Chemical Romance back to Jason Derulo, like that's quite a gap, genre and stylistically, right? So is there some sort of through line that's connecting those different situations for you?
Yeah, I think it comes back to not having an ego and not wanting to, you don't always have to be all of yourself all the time, right? A lot of people in this industry, you can executive produce a whole album. You could write every song. You could engineer and mix the whole thing, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's what's best for the project, not only from a product standpoint, but also from a relationship standpoint. So sometimes it's okay if you're only the guitar player. Sometimes it's okay if you're only the mix engineer. So I've kind of learned to separate my ego from the equation in dealing with these relationships so that I can be involved in a variety of capacities on so many exciting projects. So I think sometimes people self-sabotage and they get a little bit too greedy, especially too early on in their career. So I think it's important to kind of relinquish control and just let things come to you, because the easier you are to work with, the more business is going to come your way in the long run. So
Yeah, where are you finding these kind of opportunities funneling to you? Is it from like stemming all the way back to, say, the first big opportunity that you had? Is that stemming from a direct artist to you relationship that has been established, or is it coming through word of mouth through like management camps or
yeah.
other producers, or kind of, you know what I mean? Like what's sparking all these opportunities for you?
I think the opportunities come from just being a part of a scene and, making yourself useful. Like I said earlier, it wasn't just one thing where I got signed to a publishing deal and then all these doors opened up for me. I didn't have a viral moment on TikTok. I didn't have like an overnight success situation. So it was just several different kind of seeds that I planted over the years. Maybe I'm an apprentice to this producer who introduces me to a great co-writer that becomes a collaborative partner of mine long term. Maybe I play drums on a live gig for a local artist who also, works with a number of other artists in the New York scene. So these are little things that have kind of happened to me serendipitously over the years. And by virtue of that, I've kind of developed my network over time. So I wouldn't say it was just one thing, but a few things could help artists um, in tandem with kind of what I've seen on my side. And I think that if you're early on in your career, you should definitely find someone you look up to and kind of shadow them as an apprentice, whether that's on the writing or the producing side. I've done that with a few folks here around New York, and that's opened doors for me, not only from an educational standpoint, but also from a networking standpoint. Um, and also, if you're a writer or you're a producer and you're used to working in a studio setting, I wouldn't necessarily rule out live opportunities as well, because they might not be the biggest paycheck. But if you cover for someone and you play guitar for them live, um, it's another window to open a relationship to where you could do more work with them in a studio
Yeah.
setting as well. So it's kind of just like, planting several seeds over years and years. And then naturally you kind of just develop this architecture behind which you could work. So.
Yeah, that I mean that just happened with one of my longtime friends, Keith Urban's drummer. They went to go do a show, and they one of the background singers couldn't make it to the show, and they needed somebody who could like get to the gig quickly and who can jump into action basically. And so she did that gig, and that gig spawned into going to do shows at the Vegas residency that Keith Urban was doing, and now it's leaning into other tour dates and stuff too. So yeah, and also like relationships and networking. It's like the more hands you shake, the more opportunities you create for yourself, right? Let's switch gears a little bit and let's talk about the reality of being an artist in 2025 and how important data is to a rising act. You want to tap into kind of your experience in working with Chartmetric and data and analyzing it and how to leverage that to your advantage as an artist?
Yeah, absolutely. So I work with Chartmetric in the client relations department. And essentially, what I do for the company is I'm able to kind of speak the language of the artist. So I help explain the relevance of data to artists in the independent community, labels, publishers, folks of that nature as well. And What I try to tell artists, especially who could perhaps be a little bit intimidated by data, is it really just tells your story in a really effective way that would allow you to better monetize your career. So it doesn't take away from the artistry of your career. It just puts some context behind it to where you can operate professionally long term. So whether that's looking at your engagement data over time and trying to, get some healthy growth in that respect, or looking at where your top cities or your top countries are if you want to book your next tour or book a festival or do a merch pop up or something like that. They're just ways for you to better communicate with your audience and supercharge your audience so that you can focus on things that are working and perhaps avoid some traps and some missteps that might not be working best for you. So,
Yeah. Do you have any specific case studies that kind of come to mind that you've seen of where an act looks at a certain sector of data, whether that's social or through the DSPs in terms of like markets? Like, do you have any case studies of like they looked at the data, they took this, they applied it, and then got X, Y, and Z result from that?
yeah, I think a lot of times artists kind of try to be everywhere all at once, which is pretty difficult. So, what I tell folks, especially who are just starting out, is do an experiment where you do 90 days worth of organic content, posting at least 3 or 4 times a week in tandem with releasing songs, say every 2 or 3 weeks, and just see how that does organically. And then once you get kind of a control group where you have organic content that's being released across platforms over a long enough period of time, you could run an experiment to say, all right, well, I'm really catching fire on YouTube Shorts. I'm not doing so well on TikTok. Maybe that means that my audience just naturally gravitates towards one platform over another. And that happens, right? Different types of people use different platforms for different reasons. And that all informs you once you get to the next stage of your career and perhaps you have a little bit of an ad budget from a label or you've saved up some money or you're, trying to do a tour run and you're looking to promote that in an effective way. Now you at least know where your audience lives and how to effectively market to them. So one specific example would be, in my career, when I first started releasing music, I always paid so much attention to Spotify and Spotify streams since they, obviously they have the majority of the market share when it comes to DSPs. And also it's just a hot look, right? If you have a lot of monthly listeners, that's something that from a vanity perspective would allow you to promote yourself more effectively to a label or a publisher. But what I didn't realize was the style of music I was creating actually lended itself better to a Pandora audience. So I was getting a lot of support on Pandora when it comes to playlisting and streams and things like that. And I had no idea about it just because I wasn't paying attention to the data. But once I realized that, it allowed me to tap into that community more effectively and reach that point where I kind of have 1,000 true fans and I can, market to them very effectively. And I know that they're authentic fans of my music rather than trying to put a square peg in a round hole and force something that isn't necessarily working for me naturally. So that's how the data could help you.
Yeah, that's super insightful because right now I'm thinking about if there's an artist that's, let's say, kind of like Sabrina Carpenter or Megan Moroney or somebody like that, somebody who's super hot right now, and you're a similar act, and there's that like comparable tool kind of thing. Correct. On Chartmetric, right? So you can go look at what's going on with Megan Moroney, for example, seeing which streaming platforms that she does best on, or which social media platforms she does best on, and that can really help you navigate where you need to be allocating most of your time, energy, and effort, rather than, like you said early on, kind of going for the shotgun approach of like, what's the saying? Spray and I don't know. There's a saying. Anyways, yeah. So that makes a lot of sense, and because if an artist's time is limited, obviously they have to create the music and wear multiple hats at the same time. The more you can like focus in and laser in on like where your gaps are, the easier you can fill them.
Exactly.
So that's such a great tool, and I think a lot of artists really need to tap into Chartmetric and use it to their advantage, because when there's so much noise going on in the industry, if it's going to give you a leg up, take the leg up,
Yeah, and it doesn't matter. I always tell artists, it doesn't matter if you have 1,000 followers or 10 million followers. The data always tells you a story. So don't be afraid about using a platform like Chartmetric, even if you're just starting out, because that will allow you to get from point A to point B much faster. And it doesn't matter whether your numbers are huge or not. You'll still get insights that will be able to point you in the right direction. So,
yeah, and the data doesn't lie.
right.
You know, like you can inflate certain vanity metrics, like you said, you can inflate them, like the Billboard charts. They can be manipulated.
Yep.
And but when it comes down to hardcore data, like through socials and engagement and streaming, the data doesn't lie, and you can't hide from it. It's like you have to face reality and then see how you can best improve those areas, and find your audience too. Find the right audience that you're looking for. Let me leave you with one more question, and kind of based on the overall analytics that Chartmetric can put in front of an artist. What like streaming platforms or social media platforms should acts really be focusing on now in 2025? And I bring this up because like Instagram just flipped their algorithm, so to speak, to where Instagram Reels, it's incentivized to show your content to non-followers first. So it's a great way to find growth and to grow the audience, right? Find new fans. What are you seeing across the board data-wise, analytics on Chartmetric that might make an artist go, maybe I should be looking at Pandora rather than Spotify, like you were saying earlier?
Yeah, I mean, I hope this doesn't sound like a cop-out of an answer, but there really is no one platform. It's entirely specific to each artist, right? So a tool like Chartmetric would be able to show you, where do my fans naturally gravitate towards? For some people, it's Instagram. For other people, it's YouTube. For other people, it's Twitch, right? So it really depends on what type of music you're making, what type of visual content you're making, because that will determine how you perform on these platforms. I will say, in general, one thing that we've been seeing at Chartmetric and in the industry as a whole is things have almost kind of gone back in time, where the element of having a live show, especially if you're in a city, is extremely important, because that drives genuine audience engagement over time. So you could have 1 million followers on Instagram, but if you only have a 2% engagement rate, that's not necessarily going to do you much good. But every single person who buys a ticket to see you at a club or at a theater is a true fan of your music. And that leads to, physical album sales. That leads to an increase of Shazams, which informs radio support. Maybe a label rep is in the audience and wants to sign you to a deal. So I know a lot of artists these days who are really honing their live game, because even if you're maybe playing in front of a crowd of 200 people, that's 200 people who you have their attention for an hour, rather than going on Instagram Live and having people who maybe tune in and out and just don't have that genuine touch point or that genuine engagement with an artist. So I guess a two-part answer in that sense. Firstly, you got to pay attention to where your audience naturally gravitates towards on the digital side. And then secondly, don't sleep on the live performance game, because that opens a lot of doors through promoting yourself on a physical basis, but also online as well. So
cool. And what would you say, there's probably an aspiring artist or songwriter or producer listening to this chat right now, and they feel like they cannot find a door to open for them. They can't find a way in, or just they're getting a lot of no's and they haven't got that one yes yet. Mm-hmm. What would be some wisdom you would share with them on their journey?
Well, if you're a songwriter and a producer, I would say that it's a healthy thing from a promotion standpoint and from a mental health standpoint to also have an artist project where you have a creative outlet to put out your own music. Because I know what it's like to have tons of songs sitting on your hard drive and, hoping that they get placed with artists. But to a certain point, that's just out of your control. And it doesn't matter how good the song is. You just need the right timing and the right connect and the right moment in the zeitgeist to make that work. But if you have an outlet where you can release your own music on Spotify and promote it yourself, then you know that, okay, if I put this out, I'm at least going to have 1,000 people who are going to enjoy it, and I'll feel creatively fulfilled that way. So I would definitely recommend, if you're an aspiring songwriter or producer, experiment with putting out your own music as well, because that could lead to co-writing opportunities, that could lead to syncs that would get you a nice cash injection, and it would teach you what it's like to be an artist as well. So it's okay to kind of hop between those two paths because they often intertwine, and it makes for a more exciting and interesting career overall.
Yeah, and to borrow some philosophy from Rick Rubin, who says, do not create for the audience, create for yourself.
Correct.
And find that fulfillment, and then hopefully it will connect with an audience and resonate.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Cool, Dom. Well, I really appreciate you carving out some time to bring this wisdom to the audience.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone, for having me. I really appreciate this. If you want to stay in touch with me, I'm everywhere at Dom Did It on social. But yeah, this is super exciting, and thanks for valuing, my story and Chartmetric as well. So
absolutely. Thanks, Dom.